I'm Jeff Hirsch, and in this video I'm going to show you an easy shortcut for sky replacement with reflections using Luminar 4. And best of all, there's no hand masking required. One of the coolest features in Skylum's Luminar 4 program is the ability to do something that they call AI sky replacement, which simplifies the process of swapping out a boring or poorly exposed sky for a more interesting or better exposed one. Using an artificial intelligence algorithm, Luminar 4 can completely and believably replace the sky in your image without you ever having to use selections, masking, or layers. It's all fairly automatic. And that's the genius of this feature. It finds and masks off the sky areas automatically, so you don't have to spend hours in Photoshop with a brush and a magnifier, painstakingly selecting the sky areas by hand and praying that you didn't accidentally color outside the lines, resulting in halos at the edges of your selections and a poorly blended replacement sky. Now, I'll admit I was skeptical when the feature was first introduced, but I have to say, after using it for some time now, I'm more than a little impressed with how well it works on the majority of images that call for sky replacement. The AI routine does a fantastic job of automatically masking the sky portions and allowing you to fill them in with one of the built-in replacement skies that comes with the program, or even one of your own sky photos. The key to successful sky replacement is making sure that it looks realistic, natural, and true to the original scene in terms of exposure, color, and detail. Differences in exposure and white balance between the original image and the new sky will make the composite image look fake to your viewers, even if they can't explain exactly why. Fortunately, Luminar comes with some clever adjustments that you can make in the sky replacement tool that give you the ability to modify the position, exposure, color temperature, and blur amount of the replaced sky so it blends in naturally with the existing image. There's even a slider to relight the original scene so it's more harmonious with the replacement sky. And using these kinds of adjustments, I am able to more successfully match my new sky with my original scene in almost every case. Which brings me to the reason for this little video. One of my photography students recently asked me if Luminar can do sky replacement on a photo that has reflections in it, like on the surface of a lake or other body of water, and make it so that the reflections match the replaced sky and still look natural. And I thought to myself, that's a darn good question. Because if you're going to convincingly replace a sky, you need to do it everywhere the sky appears in your image, including reflections. A quick search on YouTube netted me a dozen or so tutorial videos from various authors and educators explaining how to accomplish this sort of thing in Luminar. Every one of these tutorials suggested a nearly identical technique for solving the problem of matching the reflections to the replaced sky. Unfortunately, I found that every one of their solutions had a significant drawback to it, which I will explain momentarily. First, they all tell you to use Luminar to replace the sky as you normally would, but they also caution you that for their reflection technique to work, you can't use one of the built-in skies. You have to use one of your own skies because you'll need access to that sky file again for making the reflection later on, and it's not easy to get at the ones that are built into the program. Second, after using Luminar's AI sky replacement, they have you create a new image layer on top of your base layer and to load it up with the same sky that you had used before. This new image layer then gets flipped over vertically and positioned to be used as the reflection in your image. Finally, and here's where they lose me completely, in the last step of every one of these tutorials, They instruct you to use the layer masking brush on the reflection image layer to hand mask the reflected sky back into the lower half of the scene. Yep, you heard me right. They all want you to hand paint the mask for the reflection. And in every one of those videos, you can watch the person doing the demo struggle to paint that mask evenly. They have to work hard to avoid leaving halos at the edges of their hand-masked reflections. They're always painting and erasing and painting and erasing to get it just right. They frequently fast forward over the tedious parts of the process in their tutorials and skip to the reveal at the end where they show off their replacement sky with matching reflection. Now, the first thing I thought when I watched these videos is that the entire purpose of using a program like Luminar to replace a sky is to take advantage of that amazing AI sky replacement tool to do all of that difficult masking work for you. Why on earth would you want to manually mask by hand all that stuff for the reflection? You may as well do that in Photoshop if you're going to do it by hand. So it seemed to me that all of these solutions were A, way more work than most folks probably want to do, and B, a complete waste of Luminar's great AI sky replacement tool. After scratching my head over this little problem for a few minutes and wondering why it had to be so hard, I came up with what I thought might be a relatively quick and simple solution. In fact, it was so simple, I doubted myself at first. I wondered if there was something I was overlooking. Surely, there's some way we can make the AI sky replacement algorithm automatically find and mask the reflected area as well. I mean, there's got to be a better way, right? And sure enough, after a couple of experiments, I managed to figure out a simple, repeatable method to do exactly that without any sort of hand masking at all. And best of all, you can use either the built-in skies that come with Luminar or you can use your own skies. That's up to you. And when you see how the trick is done, you won't believe how easy it is to do. It's almost embarrassing how simple the solution to the problem ends up being. Here's how to pull it off. I'm going to start by sending my image from Lightroom to Photoshop instead of sending it directly to Luminar like I normally would. Doing it this way allows me to run Luminar as a Photoshop plugin more than once before returning the finished image back to Lightroom. I want to make sure this is as easy as possible for myself. Once I've got it in Photoshop, I choose Filter, Skylum Software, Luminar 4 to pass the image from Photoshop to Luminar for the normal AI sky replacement you are already familiar with. One quick side note here. I've noticed in some images that the AI sky replacement algorithm can accidentally pick up some of the reflected areas of your image, thinking that they are also part of the sky. So you may need to add a gradient mask to restrict the sky replacement to just the upper part of the image. The program is good, but it still gets fooled by some images. After you have selected, positioned, and adjusted your replacement sky, and don't forget all those great advanced settings like exposure, white balance, defocus, etc. After you've got your sky set up the way you'd like it, click the Apply button in the upper left corner to send it back to Photoshop with the new sky. And here's the part where I explain the ridiculously simple trick that makes this technique possible. Are you ready? Are you sitting down? Here's the big reveal. When the file with the replaced sky gets back to Photoshop, rotate it 180 degrees and then send the rotated image back to Luminar a second time to do AI sky replacement on the reflected areas. Call it AI reflection replacement, if you will. When you do AI sky replacement a second time on the rotated image, I've found that there's an even greater chance it will mess with some of the already replaced sky, so we will once again fence off that area so it doesn't get touched using a gradient mask to confine that sky replacement tool to just the reflected area, the same way we restricted the original sky replacement from reaching down into the reflection. Next, make sure you pick the exact same sky as before. We want it to match perfectly. Open up the advanced settings and click the little checkbox to flip the reflected sky horizontally. Then use the horizon position slider to move that sky up or down so the replaced reflection matches the position of the replacement sky as closely as possible. Finish off the illusion by changing the sky exposure, sky temperature, and sky defocus settings. Generally, I turn down the exposure in the reflection since it is frequently darker than the sky itself. I also turn up the sky defocus setting in the reflected area to smear it out a bit for a more natural look. It blends nicely with the water and adds to the reality of the illusion that you are reflecting the replacement sky. Once you are satisfied with the look of your reflection replacement, click the Apply button in the upper left-hand corner again to send it back to Photoshop. When the file gets back to Photoshop, rotate it 180 degrees one last time by choosing Image, Image Rotation, Rotate 180 degrees from the menu. This will put the sky back up top and the reflection down below. You can then save the finished picture back to Lightroom where it can be found sitting next to the original photo. And even though we had to take it through Luminar twice, we didn't really have to do any kind of finicky hand masking or selection to swap out the reflection as well. We were able to get Luminar to do the work for us with its AI sky replacement tool and figure out exactly where to make the mask. We even had some adjustment tools to help that reflection blend in more naturally with the existing scene. This simple technique works surprisingly well with the majority of images I tried it on. It's been a pleasant surprise how good some of the sky and reflection replacements turn out. They look so much more realistic than the ones that have only the sky replaced but no reflection. That's all for this video. Thanks so much for listening. For more photo and post-processing tips and tricks, along with information on all of my online classes, workshops, and photo tours, be sure to sign up for my mailing list using the form at my website, jeffhirsch.com.